Hello, everybody. In our previous lectures on course outcomes and program outcomes, we have discussed about how to write program outcomes, course outcomes, program objectives, and course objectives efficiently. Powerful program outcomes and powerful course outcomes that clearly describe what would be the abilities of graduates after completing a program and also after attending a particular course, because we know that when a graduate does a program consists of a number of courses. So in each course there would be some outcome, and attainment in each course will contribute towards the attainment of program outcome. So when we talk about course outcomes and program outcomes, and when we do not map those outcomes, that how much program outcomes we are attaining, the program outcomes which are written as expected outcomes after doing a program, how much attainment is there, and if program outcome is attained, program outcome is demonstrated to some extent, 70%, 60%. How much course outcomes are contributing in the program outcome? How much attainment is there in the course outcome? So that the program outcome comprises of those attainment of course outcomes, and the program outcomes are actually being demonstrated by the students, by the graduates in terms of brilliant skill set, excellent academic knowledge, and the values. So the idea is to understand mapping between course outcome and program outcome so that the target which was set with the help of a number of resources, teaching learning pedagogies, a number of curriculum designs, institutional vision and mission statements, the program outcomes and course outcomes were articulated. How much attainment is there? So when we say that when we are going to map course outcome and program outcome, it becomes extremely important to also talk about assessment. How do we assess the attainment of course outcomes? How do we assess the mapping between course outcomes and program outcomes? So let us understand this mapping. So this is learning outcomes and mapping. You see here, as we know that degree level outcomes are there. Under the degree level outcomes, you have program outcomes. Each program, there may be a number of degree level outcomes under which there may be a number of degrees at the level of, master, undergraduate, and so on in different disciplines like science, arts, engineering, commerce. So in each program, let's say Bachelor of Arts, Mass Communication, or Bachelor of Engineering, Computer Science. In each program, there are outcomes, and under each program, there are number of courses, and each course has its own course outcomes. And we also know, even going down, each course comprises of number of lectures, number of lessons. So we also need to understand actually that how a particular lesson, how a particular lecture is helping the students to demonstrate certain skill set and the knowledge. So how does this lecture contribute towards the course outcome, and then course outcome contributes towards the program outcome? So you can understand this diagram, an interesting picture where course outcomes are, aligning to program outcomes. Program outcomes, as we have seen in our previous lectures, writing about course outcomes and program outcomes, whenever we write program outcomes, we keep always the graduate attributes in our mind, that what are the graduate attributes which are required to be there, which need to be demonstrated by our students and graduates after completing a program. And of course, with the help of vision and mission statement, we write the aims and objectives like program education objectives. So this lecture is about mapping course outcomes with the program outcomes. So this is another interesting diagram where we have already discussed about the outcomes, How do we derive outcomes? How do we derive program educational objectives? They are written with the help of vision and mission statement. What is the broad objective? What is the broad goal? And how to achieve that broad vision of an institute, that is through the mission statement. And then program educational objectives are there, program outcomes are there, and under the program outcomes we have number of course outcomes. And in writing all these statements, we have already discussed, a number of stakeholders are involved. Recommendations from stakeholders, that includes parents, that includes students, that includes alumni, industries, employers, and so on. So many, stakeholders need to be involved, so that they will give us the feedback. What do they want from the graduates at the end of a program, after completing a particular program? The alumni, what do they feel? Alumni, if they feel that there is need of improvement in curriculum. The employers feedback, the industries, what is their requirement, what is the current requirement in the students. All those things are taken into consideration. It's not only simply, writing the statement. Rather, we write those statements very specifically as per the recommendation and suggestion of all these stakeholders. Of course, the program educational objectives and outcomes can get modified, can get revised regularly on the basis of continuous quality improvement approach. And that comes from the assessment and the analysis. Our assessment, our feedback mechanism can indicate that there is some improvement needed in the program educational and objectives, which need to align with the great vision of the institute, that also is catering the needs of all the stakeholders, industries, employers, and the suggestions of alumni and other stakeholders have been also taken into consideration. So talking about analysis, institutional assessment is there, under which we assess the program, how is program performing, program assessment. And under assessment of program, there are, a number of courses, so each course needs to be assessed. And how do we assess, how do we analyze this? Restructuring of academic components in terms of curriculum design, curriculum enrichment, curriculum revision, teaching practices, teaching pedagogies, teaching methodologies, modern tools usage, how many modern tools are being used in delivering the teaching, learning activities, teaching learning materials, the resources, and most importantly, what are the assessment tools in order to, evaluate the performance of the student. When the student is doing a program, and under a program, student is doing a number of courses, how those courses are evaluated, how those courses are assessed, that is also very important. And by doing so, if we have some feedback that requires, revisiting all these outcome and objective statements, that also can be done. But once we have written program outcomes and course outcomes, then we need to map how much is the success. Success might not be 100%, success might not be 90% what we claim, and what actually students have been able to demonstrate. There may be some correlation, there may be some mapping, and how much is the mapping, how much is the alignment, that we need to understand closely. So as we know that the outcome based education is a learner centric, where how, what do I want my students to learn, that is described by the learning outcomes. And what do I know about my students, that also, is included in the learning outcomes while we write. How can I facilitate that learning, how can I facilitate that much learning which can create this kind of learning outcome in the students, that is reflected by the teaching learning pedagogies, a number of activities, teaching learning practices, teaching learning processes which are involved. And assessment tasks, assessment tools, assessment practices, the rubrics which are used to assess the course conduction, course success, and the evaluation of a student also plays an important role. So in all these, the components, be it a learning outcome, be it teaching learning pedagogies, be assessment, everything is depending on the, everything is learner centric. How do I know that the learning does happen? How do we assess so that we can understand that learning has taken place and it has actually, impacted the learning, and the learning has brought some positive changes in the students in terms of skill set, knowledge, and the values. So therefore, everything is learner's perspective, learner centric. So how to map? The question is how to map. As we know, and as we have discussed about objectives, outcomes, and course outcomes, educational objectives involve graduate survey, employer survey, and then we write program outcomes, and then there may be a matrix, a table that maps program outcomes and program objectives. And when we talk about program outcomes, exit survey, and there may be internal and external surveys that might be included in order to write the program outcomes. And once we have program outcomes, we need to have a matrix. Need to have a mapping table or mapping matrix between the course outcomes and the program outcomes. In terms of course outcomes, course outcome analysis has to be prepared, a table that must reflect how course was evaluated, using which assessment tools the course was evaluated. And one can also involve the survey, that when the course was conducted, it was evaluated, what was the impact in the students and the learners. There may be surveys included. So this is one example where we can understand these are the course outcomes and these are the program outcomes. And as we have also discussed in our previous lectures, there may be some program specific outcomes as well. So wherever we find that the course outcome one, if we have written 6 course outcomes for a program, say mass communication, say data structure. So we have say 6 course outcomes. So if the course outcome one is mapping with program outcome one, because you must have written the 12 program outcomes or 10 program outcomes. So is it matching? If it is matching, how much, what is the level of mapping? What is the level of alignment? We can use certain scale, either 0 to 3 if there is no mapping, or there is mapping. So if it is closely aligning to the program outcome one, which we claimed that this would be the attainment of students after attending and completing the program. So accordingly, we have to write the value, the scores wherever the corresponding course outcome matches with the program outcome. And then we can calculate the average value. The process is very simple. Just write down the course outcomes this side. If we have 3 course outcomes, write down course outcome 1, course outcome 2, course outcome 3. We can also write the course outcome statements also in these rows. And then we can write the program outcome. Say in our program, say we have 9 program outcomes. So we can just write program outcome 1 to program outcome 9. And wherever we find that, say course outcome 4 has a mapping with program outcome 3, and the attainment is, the alignment is not full but 2, in the scale of 3 we can write 2. And in the similar manner, once we complete this table, we can evaluate the average. Average means that how much mapping is there for each program outcome. For example, program outcome 5 or program outcome 12, probably the program outcome 12 is, say it is related to ethical values or society or environment. And suppose there is a course where you did not have any course outcome related to ethical values and the society and environment, so there is no mapping and the value is 0. So in this manner, the process is very, very simple. Just note down the course outcomes on rows and co-program outcomes in columns. And wherever you find that the course outcome number 3, 4, or 2 is mapping with a particular program outcome, your program outcome statements, your course outcome statement. Just see that if there is any relevance, if there is any mapping. In the course outcome, if you have written that this course would be able to develop a mathematical and algorithm design skill set in the students, say in a course, and in a program outcome, you have written that the students will be able to demonstrate a great mathematical and analytical skill. So you can say that in the course, students are able to do some algorithm, able to understand some program. So it is being mapped with the mathematical and analytical knowledge. So that program outcome can be mapped with the course outcome, which is correspondingly, which is relevant with the program outcome statement. So in this manner, how much attainment is there? You have to evaluate that how much the student is able to understand the how much the student is able to, demonstrate the knowledge of algorithm, demonstrate the knowledge of mathematics. So for that, you need to assess the courses. And in order to assess, you need certain tools. So therefore, let's talk about assessment and attainment. Talking about assessment of the intended learning outcomes, which we have expressed that this will be or expected that this will be the learning outcomes, the concepts need to be evaluated in terms of knowledge, skill set, and the values. So it requires certain methods, and the methods are of either the teaching learning activities where we have a regular assessment components in the form of quizzes, tests, and so on, assignment, projects. So teaching learning activities or engagements are there through which we can assess. And there is another category which is a very, very important category, important type of assessment. And this is something which we call either formative assessment or summative assessment. Formative and summative assessment, definitely the teaching learning assessment tools where we are doing test, quizzes, assignment, projects, seminar, presentation, etc. All these tools, all these assessment methods may fall under either a formative or summative. So we can either do in the formative manner or in summative manner. So what is this? And in order to, before we understand formative and summative assessment, in fact, assessment is something which is very important to understand. Assessment for learning, assessment as learning, assessment of learning. All these are different. So if we say assessment for learning, it enables teachers to use information about students' knowledge, understanding, and skills to inform their teaching. Teachers provide feedback to students about their learning and how to improve. So this is assessment for learning. So that students are going to learn, we are assessing that how to go for that learning. So the teachers can provide a feedback to the students about the learning mechanism and how to improve and how to improve the learning outcome. Assessment as a learning, so it involves students in learning process where they monitor their own progress and ask the questions and practice skills. Assessment as a learning, so learner himself or herself is the part of assessment. Student uses self assessment and teacher feedback. Teacher has already given the feedback under assessment for learning to reflect on their learning, consolidate their understanding, and work towards learning goals. Lastly, assessment of learning. It assists teachers to use evidence of student learning and assess student achievement against learning goals and standards. So this actually demonstrates the learning outcome of these students. So this is another diagram where we can understand there are two types of tools, direct and indirect. Direct includes theory course, practical course. Indirect includes course surveys, faculty survey, a number of exit surveys, presentations, seminars can be considered as indirect mechanism. Direct includes theory course, practical course, where you have some evaluation components. In terms of course, you have direct, how can you evaluate the program outcome directly? Just to get mapping between course outcome and program outcome. And then you can also, include some exit survey that students are exiting that time. You can get a survey from the students, how much they have been able to learn, how much they have been able to achieve, what they actually aimed for, what actually they targeted it. So that kind of mapping and that kind of exit survey will evaluate the program outcome. And as far as the program education objectives, how much attainment is there, what was aimed to cover, aimed to be seen in the student, that can also be evaluated by mapping mapping the program outcomes and program objectives directly and indirectly. The alumni survey, employer survey, that can actually give us the reflection that the objectives which are set in a program, how much or to what level these objectives are, achieved. So as we are talking about assessment tools, direct tools may include class test, assignment, viva voce, tutorials, end semester examination, mid semester examination, minor project, major project, seminar, summer schools, winter schools. These are the direct assessment tools. But as far as the indirect tools are concerned, that includes exit survey, alumni feedback, curriculum feedback, when you are enriching the curriculum, when you are revising the curriculum, by what basis, on what basis you are revising. Do you have some feedback from the industries? Do you have some feedback from alumni, employer survey, parents feedback? So all these are surveys and feedbacks are actually indirect tools, and ease of, this is also extremely important in addition to direct tools that actually gives how much the learning outcome is being exhibited and demonstrated. So assessment before learning, there are three types of assessment. One is summative, other is the formative, and the last one is diagnostic. Summative assessment is done after learning. That when actually learning has taken place, when the course has been completed, when we are talking about course learning outcome or a program learning outcome, means program has already been completed by after 4 years or 3 years, and then we are evaluating, or once the course is completed and we are evaluating finally at the end of course, that is summative assessment. In terms of formative assessment, assessment during the learning. So when the course is being delivered during that 3 months or during 90 days, whatever is the duration of the course, so at regular interval, maybe each week or each every after 15 days or 20 days or 10 days, evaluation has to be done regularly by using suitable tools. That is called as formative assessment, and this plays a significant role to assess whether the students who have planned, to achieve certain outcomes, certain objectives, and we have also anticipated that this would be the outcome after attending the course. So every 10 or 15 days we can evaluate the student whether the student is able to achieve to some extent the objective which we have written and the outcome which we anticipated for, and then remedial measures can also be taken, and therefore formative assessment is very important. The other assessment is diagnostic assessment, which is assessment before learning. When we actually offer the course, we talk about what will be the prerequisite, whether the student's background is, matching with the course or not. That kind of assessment will be there so that we can say that students will be actually able to demonstrate good set of skills and knowledge after doing this course. So assessment of learning is this side. We are assessing the learning. Assessment for learning is this one, and this is your assessment after learning. So assessment for learning, assessment of learning, and assessment after learning, three are covered. And with these three, summative, formative, and diagnostic assessment types are discussed. So as you can see, in the formative assessment, you will have a regular feedback, whereas in summative assessment, you are doing just at the end of course, so it's just indicating the academic progress, and learning and teaching pedagogies are used, and that's all. And learning pedagogies are just going on, and you are probably not modifying. You don't feel any need of modification, improvement, and revision because you are only doing, the assessment at the end of course. But in the formative assessment, you do it regularly at certain interval. So you have a feedback, you have assessment by using the tools either in the form of quizzes, seminars, presentations, and then teaching learning methodologies can be evaluated, can be modified, can be revised. You can change the teaching learning pedagogies, you can change the tools, you can change the resources, and all these can be done in order to attain or in order to achieve good outcomes in the students finally at the end of course. So there is a cycle of assessment suggested by Colin Macmillan 2010. Student has to be, motivated in the beginning before he does the course, and then student ongoing student engagement, work and achievement. The activities are ongoing. That has to be evaluated, all those activities in the formative manner, and based on formative assessment you will get the feedback that is ongoing. It's not a one time feedback, it's a regular interval feedback, and that is helping to refine alignment of teaching and learning materials, teaching and learning activities, so that that gives the encouragement and motivation that this is the area where you need to improve. This is something is, the area or the scope of improvement that you need to work hard, where you need to work smartly, that the students will also get some motivation by the actual feedback at regular intervals. So this is a formative assessment cycle that actually works in order to measure the attainment of the course outcome in any students. So this is one final example where you can see that there are three program statements written, and we can map with the program outcomes. Sorry, the course outcomes are written here. We can map with the program outcomes, and these tick marks, rather than tick marks, we can write the level of mapping also, to what extent this program outcome and course outcome are mapping. And then we can also talk about, in order to deliver, in order to achieve this outcome, what was the teaching method included, how this course outcome was evaluated, whether it was evaluated in terms of assignment, presentation, seminar, exit survey. So those tools can also be written, so that which tool was used. Talking about the assessment, how the course outcome was evaluated, how a particular course was evaluated. So when you say that, when you did a test or assignment of 1,000 words or 10 marks, so you will have a complete report that will tell that what was the performance of the student in that particular component of assessment. Accordingly, you will be able to say that, that is on average basis, how many students actually performed well in that course outcome using that assessment tool. So when you have such program outcomes and course learning outcomes, you can map these course learning outcomes with program outcomes. And one more thing you can see that, in terms of Bloom's taxonomy, the level of cognitive level of the outcome, whether it was understanding, whether it is a psychomotor understanding like imitation, or psychomotor, or a cognitive level, or psychomotor level, or knowledge level, what level of development, what level of outcome was actually seen in the students, that also can be seen in the students. So in the map, in the table, in the matrix, one is writing the course outcomes in the rows, writing the program outcomes in the columns, and we can also add what are the teaching practices, pedagogies which were used to attain a particular type of course outcome, and what was the assessment tool. But you will have a separate document reporting that in terms of that assessment tool, say presentation, say quiz one, how that course performance was there. And you will bring that summary here, that in terms of assignment one, or in terms of quiz one, the performance of course outcome indicates that this course outcome is mapped with the program outcome in this particular manner. This is how you can evaluate. So to sum up, the mapping between program outcome and course outcome is very, very important, where you have to evaluate the performance of the course. You have to assess the attainment of the course using a number of assessment tools. And then finally, the course outcomes need to be mapped with the program outcomes. Which are the program outcomes relevant to the course outcomes? How much mapping is there? To what level course outcome has been achieved and mapped? So in this manner, you can also write the level of mapping, uh, in addition to, including the assessment tool and teaching pedagogies. So hope this would help in writing, or especially preparing a document where we actually map our course outcomes of different courses under a program that we offer to the students. Thank you.